Dear witches, staying up to date with the moon? Seeking a little reminders to re-enchant your world? Subscribe to the Modern Witches newsletter for lunar love notes and magical inspirations delivered right to your inbox. Modern Witches is shape-shifting, yet it will always be a project that centers our mystical community members. Do you have a course or a podcast you'd like to promote to magical babes? Want to share your art with the folks who might be most touched by its spiritual themes? Send us an email at info@witchesconfluence.org to have your work promoted on our newsletter. Subscribe to Modern Witches newsletter in the link in show notes. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Witches podcast. I am delighted to have Ysha, activist witch, here with me today to share their story about their own witchcraft practice and how deeply embedded it is into their activism. Thank you so much, Ysha, for being here with us today and for sharing your work with me. I think it was back when I was more active on Instagram, which I'm now not very active, but you had reached out and I had kind of seen your work for Witches for Palestine, which was such a successful project and is ongoing. So I just want to name that that's how we connected. And it's been a treat to, see your content and so much you're doing online in an activism sense, and also just really education for witches. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was very delightful when I saw your email pop in, because there are not many projects that try to bring together, a progressive activist take on magic, on witchcraft, and Modern Witches is one of the few of those. So I appreciate what you do, and it genuinely means something that you reached out for this, because it means that I'm attracting the right kind of kindred spirits.
Oh, sweet. I love that. I'm glad to be in community with you. And I'd love if you could just maybe introduce yourself a little bit for our listeners.
Absolutely. I'm Ysha. I go by Activist Witch on social media. I mainly do YouTube content. I'm a fat, queer, non-binary, autistic immigrant of color. I live in Wales in the UK, but I was born and raised in Italy, and my heritage is Egyptian. So there's a lot of mix there. And I started my practice in the most recent incarnation in the last 2-3 years, and I mainly do content at the intersection of witchcraft and activism. I try to educate people on issues about the systems of oppressions that we live in, patriarchy, capitalism, from a witchcraft lens, so that hopefully we can move forward together. Because I know that there's a seed of commonality if people are interested in witchcraft but don't necessarily know much about activism. And having seen that seed, I was like, I can grow from that. We can grow together from that. And that's basically why I started to do what I do.
Amazing. I love that. Yeah, I think as I was preparing for this conversation and thinking about the work you do, I was thinking about the increase in popularity of witchcraft and magical practices in the last 20 years, I want to say, and how the subversive element of witchcraft, the political element of witchcraft, has been either glossed over or ignored, I guess. And for me, when I look at your work, it's so nice to see somebody who's really illuminating how those things cannot be taken apart, right?
Never. We need to know our past to know the responsibility that we have on our shoulders, really, when we go under the name of witch. Because it's something that I talked about recently as well, because I think myself and other creators like Kellyanne Maddox had in the last 6 months, I think, had pushed back because we are political, but I would argue everybody is, just not everybody realizes that they are, because every choice of not doing things is really political because it has an effect on our life. And there was discussion about projects like Witches for Trump or trans exclusionary radical feminist turfs claiming that they are witch hunted. And that to me was very, very obvious, doing something that is completely ignorant about where the term witch and how the term witch was used against people that were at the margins. So when you stand with the main power and the main fascism, really, that is going on in an authoritarian way, you cannot by definition be a witch. You can be an esotericist, you can be an occultist, you can be a magician, but the way that we seem to have forgotten the fact that people died when that term was put on them. I completely understand why it's convenient for the system to sort of water down the meaning, but it's something so embedded in our history that I feel compelled when people don't know where we come from to remind that we have a legacy on our shoulders beyond our practice, beyond our altars. When we go under that name, we stand with the marginalized. Witchcraft is not a centrist position.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it is interesting to see sort of these mainstream takes of witchcraft that try to, I don't know, uphold capitalism. And it's just clear, I think it's clear to many witches and energetically sensitive people that it doesn't fit, right? Like there's something that's totally misaligned there. But I would love to like maybe take a few steps back and just ask you about your own sense of spirit and magic in your life. Like when did you become aware of yourself as a witch?
That actually is a question that made me reflect on it, because I have multiple answers to that. I was raised in Italy, so I was raised Catholic. Really folk Catholic though, because I come from a village that is like 600 people. So a lot of what we did that we call Catholicism is really folk magic. And I didn't realize until I started then to dip my toes in witchcraft in my adult life. I think I have three main phases. Around the age of like 12, 13, I started to have this, people have imaginary friends, and I had this absolute, complete, based on nothing belief that there was a sort of entity that was looking out for me that I used to call fate. Like the concept of fate I had anthropomorphized in my head.
Wow.
Which in hindsight, it's miraculous, just because growing up as a child of color in a predominantly white country like Italy is, and Italy has no concept of anything that is not white. Italy had colonies, but they never had to face their colonial past because they lost World War II. So it's so intrinsically racist on a systemic level, much more than even we had the perception in the Western world, like in the US or in the UK. There are challenges that have never been made to Italy. Italy still does blackface in Italy, and it's fine according to them. So growing up there, and I always knew, like, I'm a guest here. I was born there. My mother is white, but I always had this perception, I'm a guest. So however the much they treat me, it's their right, because I'm not quite like them. So making up this entity in my head, believing that no matter how hard things were, they were for a higher reason, a better reason, it would have paid off. It's very naive, but it's genuinely the only thing that let me grow older than what I was. So that was the first part. And I think around 16, I started to read about reincarnation and that kind of thing, the work of Brian Weiss, which at that point I was like very, very skeptical, and I was agnostic going towards atheist. But I was like, of all the options, I'd like this one. This is convenient. I'd like not to lose everything that I'm putting together. But in the next like decade after that, I was just like, yeah, I still had this idea of there's something higher that I equate to an intelligence. It cannot just be random. But I couldn't quite find my spiritual home anywhere. And I moved, I think, severely towards atheism. And then in 2022, I think what made me go openly towards witchcraft was death. We experienced a loss in the family, and nobody takes death well. My spouse got worried about me because I physically didn't take it well. I think it's one of those things where my autism showed up very strongly, and there was just a complete lack of acceptance that then affected my quality of life.
Mm.
And it was very surprising because my spouse has a very scientific background, like they used to study physics, and it was very surprising because that happened, and then they saw me in that state, and they came to me saying, "Why don't we do a ritual, sort of a funeral, a goodbye for this loss?" And what they proposed to me was a ritual that was calling on to Persephone to ask for safe passage for this soul. And that was witchcraft. And I was like, it's not the kind of thing that you do. So that was what got me into this current phase. In 2022, it was sort of my anchor. The despair was such that the finest of thread could have led me. And witchcraft was that. And it was very surprising to see that instantly I could find myself connected to so many things that I didn't know how to connect anymore. Ancestor work was one of the main things that came to mind. My grandparents who raised me passed away over 30 years ago now. And I have very little memory of them because I was a child. But they were the most real family that I ever had. And it was not something that I could ever have present in any way. Like there wasn't. Also, they are buried in Italy. I don't go to Italy anymore. So there was really no active connection that I could have. And it was clearly something that I suffered. And I don't know why it's not more common in just general life. It was nice to see that one of the main things that people can talk about is spiritual connection, spirits connection, and therefore ancestor work. And I was like, oh, I can, not necessarily even claiming to be psychic or anything like that, but the simple fact that I could have their pictures out and, light a candle and spend the time thinking about them, or even like talking to the pictures that I have of them. I don't know why it's not something that in, normal and almost airports practices we don't do. And I don't know why, because it was the simple fact that I can do that, it's healing, and makes me miss them slightly less because they're an active presence still this way.
Right.
Yeah, that's how.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of that. I think grief is one of those places where, our understanding of spirit comes into focus, right? And, not only like when we've been touched by death, but it's like the experience of being unmoored, in a grief experience. It makes you reach for any anchor,
Yes.
possible. And witchcraft is an extremely potent tool and path for navigating through uncharted territory, uncertainty,
I also love
unknowns.
that it's one of those things where you can take action, you can take control. You don't need to mutuate and give that control to, say, if you're Catholic, to a priest or things like that. One of the things that I understand why it can be concerning, like when I try to explain to someone that is not within my circle of witchy people, they equate witchcraft with that kind of almost scammy things that, you have, I don't know, phone psychics or phone lines and stuff like that. And I completely understand the risk there when you are grieving and you want to reach for anyone that can become an intermediate. And I, especially coming from Italy, like something that I used to see as a child a lot, and probably what took me a long time to reconnect and even consider witchcraft, and specifically tarot. Tarot is very common in Italy. Like, you don't need to go under the name of witch to be a cartomancer. Everybody, every family has a loyal cartomancer. I spent most of my childhood brought to houses of cartomancers that my mother would go to. And I do remember that because it's so common, it cannot be necessarily connected to not even a call, but an authenticity. So I understand why, because of the ineffable quality of witchcraft and divination and all these things, it's a fine line between what you can find for yourself and what people can take advantage of you for. And so I understand that can be dangerous at times. Again, when you are so much into despair that the finest of threads could lead you. And so people can take advantage of that. What I love of witchcraft, and you start your own practice of witchcraft, is that you discard the intermediate. You discard the fact that you have to rely on some higher authority than yourself, that is still human though, to get in touch with anything that you feel the need to connect to. It's your practice, you make it, you do the work. And I think that sense of empowerment is really important when something is taken from you and you are grieving. And I think that's one of the main differences that I found, that it was a challenge in a way to that skepticism that rightfully people have when very, very softly I explain, well, technically, along with an activist, I identify as a witch. And the first reaction that I have is always like, oh, like I can see that their thoughts is, are you a scammer then? And I it is what mostly made me understand the difference between the perception that we have from the outside of witchcraft, that it can be a bit dodgy, and then when you step into it and you actually understand, you do you can have your tarot read or whatever, like even just to see how other people do it. I do it with my friends, like I have both tarot readings from my friends so that I see their style and everything. But the fact that you can take control of things for yourself and develop yourself is something that I don't think people perceive from the outside, but it's very, very important. And it's something that no other spirituality, in my perception, gives people the ability to do.
I agree. And it's so empowering in that way, right? I love your story about sort of having this sense of your guardian, your fate guardian angel. I mean, I resonate with that because when I was a kid, suffering, really what I can acknowledge now is like trying to heal from trauma in my own way. I was also raised Catholic, but I started praying to my own guardian. And it wasn't like an angel, but it was like a spirit. It was like what maybe, in Hermeticism they would call like your daemon, like your Holy Spirit. And I think that is so special and potent, and it affirms exactly what you're saying about like this connection you have to spirit that is only yours. It's this very personal, direct relationship, which I believe is, why witchcraft and other radical religious practices were seen as so heretical and politically, dangerous, essentially.
Yeah, because, autonomy. Autonomy is what most systems of powers do not want to give us.
Right. Yeah. So your work is so it's just like so rich and developed. Like, are you a researcher? Is that a part of your practice? I'm curious how you delved into all of this.
I am. It's accidental.
Mm,
When you come from multiple marginalized identities like I do, there's the belief, and it's fair, and I understand it, that your existence is activism, is resistance. I can tell from my point of view that it took me a very long time to embrace that. Like I
mm,
played my cards to try and be as invisible and as assimilated as possible to not attract the wrong kind of attention. I tried to play the good immigrant. Um, and the least attention that I raise, the better, because it's not going to be bad attention, which is something that it's the only kind of attention that I thought I could raise.
mm.
And then 2016 and the Brexit vote happened here in the UK. At that
Right.
point, I'd been living here between the UK and Ireland for 12 years. And still, when the vote happened, and I was already with my partner, that then became my spouse, and they are British, they are white
Mm,
British. And I remember being stopped in the street by people that were, promoting the Remain vote. And my partner was very direct and said, "Oh yeah, like I need to keep her here." So of course. And even then, my answer to that was, "Oh, it's not for me to tell the British people what they want to do because I'm a guest here." So
mm,
that was still my mindset. If they decided this is not for them, it's not for me to tell them this thing. And then the vote happened, and because the UK, in a way, is so much more open-minded and progressive, not for merit, but because there are things. The silver lining of having had something as such a force of destruction as the British Empire was, is that they had colonies, they had to deal with their colonies, and they had to deal with the immigration that came from the colonies. So they started to have immigration from South Asia and the West Indies in the 60s here. So as much as there's resistance and racism, it is relatively normal to be a person of color and be British, and the two things go together. And you have, the extremist and the white supremacist, but it was a concept that you could be a person of color and British. It's not a concept in Italy at all, that you can be of color and Italian.
mm,
So because of that, it took me a very long time to be in the UK and still to think there's work to do, there's stuff to learn, there's stuff to teach people, because it was less horrible than Italy. So
mm,
to me, it was already an advancement. Then Brexit happened, and I realized that no matter how safe I tried to play it, they would have come for me in the end. It's like the poem.
mm,
And that at, at, at a very adult age, that made me go, okay, there's no way to hide from these. They are coming for me. They will come for me. There's not enough hiding that I could. And I think there's a choice that it's fair for people that come from marginalizations that they have to do between, you take up arms and you try to educate people and you start research and you start making your experience as a teaching experience for others. But I also completely understand and respect people that are like I was before, and they go like, I have one life to live and I want to keep it safe.
mm,
And I do not, there's no judgment there. I completely understand that we do what we do when we can, because also we need to have a decent life if we have just one. For me, yeah, 2016 was very clear, um, before and after. So after that, there was a lot that didn't sit well with me, but that I did not understand why. And I was very, very ignorant on a lot of things. Like I claimed not to be political, not because I had the arrogance that sometimes we see nowadays of, oh, they're all the same. I completely knew that my being apolitical came from the fact that I did not understand politics.
mm,
And so I started to ask around, and I'm dyslexic. So to me, reading is very hard. At the same time, video essays started to become a thing that was like on YouTube. And, there were resources and you knew that there was a substance to it. There were references, there was a bibliography. But it was explained to me by someone talking that stuck more with me. So it was this combination of facts, and I started to understand things. And the more I started to have a bird's view lens on the world, the more I realized, oh shit, all of this is connected. Sorry, can I swear here? Can I say?
Oh yeah, go for it, please.
Okay. So when I realized all these things were connected, then before I even got into witchcraft and doing content about witchcraft in 2021 with my spouse, we started to make video essays on a YouTube channel that was just for that. And the reason why we did that is that I spent a couple of years researching the history of Italy and racism, because from personal experience, I knew that there was something wrong. But A, it was my normal because I was raised there. And B, I did not know what the history of Italy was. They don't teach us in school in Italy that we had colonies. There's a lot of history that has to do with fascism, realistically. That was never confronted, and it's not something that they teach you in school in Italy. So there was all this stuff that I went to research because I was like, Italy behaves this way. I do not understand why. I know that the UK behaves differently. Why?
Right.
And so that started this digging, and it could be applied to pretty much everything. And that's just what I've kept doing since. And when I opened the Activist Twitch channel, I wasn't planning on doing video essays there as well. I was just supposed to share my practice. But lo and behold, I think less than 6 months from opening the channel, I had this thing about there's so much about the aesthetic and consumerism in witchcraft. And it seems so antithetical to the cornerstone of witchcraft, which is, the communion with the land. If you don't do anything else, at least, the herbs, the land and all of that. And, having witchcore stuff that comes from Shein and you buy there seems antithetical. What's the deal? And then digging more was like, okay, I understand this, but I also understand the classist issue in thinking if something comes from fast fashion, you should never buy it. And I don't think we realize the way that climate change, but also classism intersect, and the idea of personal responsibility put on the individual that works 3 jobs is on recycling and on what they can afford to buy. It's different, and it's a distraction compared to the fact that 70% of emissions come from industrial companies. It's the kind of thing. And that was the first getaway. And I did that, and I realized that there was an interest to understand that. Basically, in a very, very short way and not exhaustive, but I explained capitalism there. And seeing that I had that ability to very, 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 very much simplify things, because if it's not simple enough that I can understand it myself, that there's no point in making it sound complicated for anyone else. I do not believe in sounding particularly intelligent just to sound intelligent and not to actually make people understand. Probably because Italian itself as a language is so convoluted and so redundant. And they place so much on the fact that if you use certain words, you sound clever without saying anything. So I try to be completely the opposite of that. And that seemed to be interesting to people. Like the moment that I reach someone that potentially is like I was when I was 16, understood nothing of the world, just had a feeling that something was wrong.
Right.
That is the idea behind everything that I do. If what I do can explain to people in simple terms the issues of the world so that they start taking action now, like I wish I was able to when I was 16, then hopefully I'm allowing them to take actions earlier than I did. And
that's so great. Yeah. No, I think it would have been so eye-opening if I had been like 16 and found one of your videos about like capitalism in the witchcraft lens. I would have been like, this is it, right? Like this makes sense. This is so resonant. Because I think there's something powerful about, the witchcraft, the sense of like having this radical autonomy and resourcing ourselves and being empowered. And then pointing out the ways that the collective is sort of like working against that. And once you feel that empowerment, I think it's something you really want to protect. At least that's my experience.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. I completely understand why in this day and age, the aesthetic, like consider how much of witchcraft is on social media. And I'm no longer on Facebook. I plan to leave Instagram by the end of the year and just move to Blue Sky. But um, there's a lot of people like to do interviews, to do podcasts that found me just through the Witches of Instagram tag.
Mm-hmm.
So I completely understand that when the main medium is a picture, there needs to be an aesthetic connected to it. And I completely understand why aesthetics are very good at distracting us from essence, because it's all about aesthetic, which is, form and function, and those are they can be very disconnected. So I completely understand why the aesthetic, having a cauldron, having a pointed hat, having all the herbs, having wax and candles. Like I completely understand why a well staged picture gets likes and gets interest. And then I completely understood why when people are stuck in the capitalistic machine of working at least 8 hours a day without considering the commuting time. And then they get home and then they have to survive on a paycheck that is not enough to sustain what rents are today, bills and food. And they try to experience something that is the opposite of this kind of hustle, which is, cottagecore, witchcore, being the witch at the edge of town that has her garden of herbs, that makes concoctions for the people of the village and lives off of that. That is very the opposite of what the real hustle. Yeah. But if you can't do that because you're stuck in the capitalist hustle, the next best thing is acquiring the objects that make you feel connected to that. And that is a sympathy that I did not have before doing the research for capitalism and cottagecore. That I completely understood why. I thought that I understood why people criticized everything that is about the aesthetic, until I realized, like, I'm disabled. I do not work outside in the world 8 hours a day. I used to live the office life, and now I can't. But I remember that kind of life, that kind of hustle, and most of it to me is a black hole, because what it took for me to be around people 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, it burned probably also because of my autism, but if it burned my brain that much and took away so much, and I have years of my life that are black holes because of that, I don't think it's good for anyone really, but it's what we have to do to survive. And so having grown a kind of empathy for someone that, if you're playing the capitalist game, and of course you're still not happy or healthy, the only thing that the money that you get from capitalism allows you to do is to get the objects that remind you of a lifestyle that could be different. And understanding those kind of things, I mean, when we start to understand the different positions that we have and go down to the root of, but what would you like as well is to be out of this, I think that's the first seed of commonality that then can help us. Okay, where can we move together then to actually get there? And that starts to make you build on community. And maybe the next thing that you know, rather than buying a cauldron, is join, your local allotment and actually grow herbs that are more witchy, even if it doesn't sound like that, than having a cauldron. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think hopefully that's the natural progression, is like galvanizing around the sense of like witchcraft as a political practice.
Yeah.
Means that you need community, right? In order to not only be effectual in your like activism, but also just to, be effectual in your resistance. Yeah, move forward, like exist, be here, you know? Do you find that you're building this kind of community online, and how has that been feeling for you?
I I think that because even when we do witchcraft as a stay solitary witches or head witches, there's this idea of again a communion with the land. If not in elves, there's the communion with the land. You know, the connection even historically to herbalism and cunning folks, and before medicine as we know it today is chemistry. There was herbalism, there was that, and it's still valid because the chemistry of the herbs is still works. And yeah, I do believe that the essence of witchcraft as a practice will lead you to community, to kindred spirits, to people that you can share those feelings, those ideas, even just the self-checking of I don't know. I've done this tarot reading. I'm not quite sure. What do you think? And being able to ask that to someone that is not going to look at you weirdly because you're pulling cards. It grows. It grows from that. And
Mm,
I made a video at the beginning of the year, I think, where going more into capitalism and on authoritarianism, like with what's happening in the US and the 47th president that unfortunately you guys have at the moment.
mm,
It genuinely made me dig and realize the entire point of witchcraft is that it's antithetical to capitalism because it's based in queerness and in community. And
mm,
queerness as the concept of going against anything that is the system, not necessarily in LGBT. And community for the fact that everything that is based in capitalism, at the end of the day, tries to make you focus on individualism and at most on the nuclear family. You need to protect your own. And that kind of sentiment is what led us to late stage capitalism and the destruction and of everything. Like, why aren't people able to afford their own home anymore? Like here in the UK, we can't afford to buy it. And from what I
mm.
understand in the US, even if you buy it, then you have property tax every year and eventually we're pressed. It's insanity the way that we have made everything. We have created a cost of living. It costs us to exist.
Yeah.
And that is based in fundamental individualism because you need to survive yourself. It doesn't matter what happens to others, you need to survive. And I completely understand why when it pushes you into just bare survival, it doesn't leave you with the time to care about the community. Because if you care about the community and you are with people, then the next step is how do I not just make myself better, but how do I make my community better? And then the next step is how do I organize for that?
Mm.
And organizing is what the system doesn't like because it means that
Yeah,
we can organize against it.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, I'd love to hear about your history with activism, with organizing, and maybe what advice you would give to somebody who's trying to get their footing in that world right now.
So that's the first thing that comes to mind is a beautiful essay that Sapling Taro wrote on mutual aid and the Six of Pentacles, which is on
Mhm.
Substack. I do sincerely recommend it because there was another way, different from mine, but very, very practical, of bringing together activism and life and community from the commonality. If you are someone that is interested in tarot, it was a beautiful, beautiful work of research and love. That's when you see, I'm not the only one that sees this.
I love that.
um,
We'll try to find that and link it.
and it's fine because I had notes. So the one thing about community and moving onto community and activism from witchcraft, the first advice that I had as someone that is also part of activist communities that have nothing to do with witchcraft in my local area
Mhm.
is a lot of people have the belief that they need to come up with an idea and then organize and then do. No, the first thing to do in activism is follow. somebody is already doing something that you can just join in and help. And, you can go and wash the dishes. It's, it, it, it doesn't have to be all that amount of work that can then feel so much that it pulls you away from the idea of doing because you're like, this is too much. No, 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 no. There are already local groups that you certainly have that are doing work. Go to one of their meetings and see how you can help them. That's the first thing that I learned, because for a long time I felt like there was not much I could do, because again, being disabled, it's the one thing that actually made me start Witches for Palestine, because where I live in Cardiff in South Wales, thankfully we have a very good queer and activist community. And since the 7th of October 2023, we had weekly protests in support of Palestine. But I wasn't physically able to go to most of them. And it made me feel like I was failing my community. And it took me a while to even consider to have compassion towards myself, and then realize, okay, showing up physically is not something that I can do. What skills do I have that I can put to the service of this, though? And that's literally how Witches for Palestine started, because I was like, listen, I am a content creator. I know how to make content. I know how to talk about things. I have contacts with a lot of other people that make content and have a huge audience. What if we put these together and find ways to educate people about Palestine? And so the first phase of Witches for Palestine was literally just doing a Q&A, because I have friends in my 3D life that are Palestinian. And I knew very little, despite being Arab myself. I knew very little about the history of Palestine. And I literally just asked them, listen, I have this access to lots of people, and I can ask content creators to share this Google form where we'll gather questions about Palestine. There's no such thing as a stupid question as long as it's, in good faith.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the story. Can you tell us the real story? And that was the first phase of Witches for Palestine. Like I got these two friends of mine in my house, and with like 20, 30 questions that we gathered across, I don't know, I think collectively the audience of all these people was like 500,000 people. Like we had Amy from Magical Crafting that alone reaches 100,000 people. We had Kelly and Maddox, who reaches like 50, 60,000. And we were just like, let's learn together. And after that, then we started a raffle of digital items, exactly because I was like, I don't know how I can actually put prizes physically together. Maybe people are going to donate from all the world. I don't know how to do that. You know what? Let's do digital. So we can do, tarot readings digitally. We can do digital art as well. All those kind of things that can be delivered basically via email or via Zoom call. And you know what? You don't need to give us money. People will donate these prizes, and you just donate to, at the time, the first time was a GoFundMe in favor of medical aid for Palestinians. And the second phase was donations that would go directly to one of the mutual aid groups that helps Palestinian refugees in Cairo, which is local to me. I know the people that organize it, and it's called Cwitches to Gaza. And I met the organizers of Cwitches to Gaza at a queer event here in Cardiff. And thankfully, they told their stories and what they do. And they went personally to Cairo, and they are in touch with people. And I genuinely believe that when you try to help people, you should just do it out of the goodness of your heart. But also, I understand that humans, being gregarious animals, they have an easier time when there's a face and a name and an individual rather than a group of people. And it also helps humanize things. So Amy and Soul from Cwitches to Gaza literally are in touch with 40 families living in Cairo. They get videos from them, they get requests from them, and you literally see what your money does, because the day that they manage to put enough money together to buy mattresses for this family in Cairo, there was also the video that this family sent to Amy and Saul saying, hey, we finally are sleeping on something that is not a floor.
Mm.
And those things help the human connection.
Mm.
And as much as I can't necessarily go outside, helping that I could. And so it's a matter of finding, alternative ways to what seems a given, because, you hear about protest, and I do understand the value of protest. And it's still hard for me today to give myself the compassion of, I'm not going out every week, but I don't get out of my house necessarily every week because of my own issues. And so there are talents, any talents that anyone has can be put to use. And again, looking around for people that are already organizing and doing something, there's certainly something that you can offer them. And it takes a moment to have that kind of self-compassion, but it works. And ultimately, it's finding other people and offering your help to other people, because community is how we survive.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's something that, like, I've struggled with in the past, is that feeling of like the overwhelm of, like, there's so much to do. How can I help? Like, what can I offer? And I think once you do reach out to the organizations that you're interested in supporting, you can you figure out, like, oh, it's not going to be overwhelming because I'm a part of a collective experience.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
it's
not
not
all
like
on your shoulders.
exactly. Like it relieves that pressure
Absolutely.
to just like participate and bring whatever you can, you know. Um so yeah, I think that's something I hear a lot from folks, is like, I'm overwhelmed. How do I
Yeah.
do this?
No.
And just by showing up, it'll make you feel, it'll relieve some of that.
It's literally just going to someone is already doing the work, and
Mhm.
everybody could use two more hands. So it's literally as easy as reaching out and go, hey, in my case, when I reached out to Gaza the first time, was like, hey, what I can do is content. So you have all these videos of your families. I can put them together into reels. We can do an interview with you and you can tell me what you do, and I can edit it with reels. So you have content to share to let people know what you do. And it doesn't seem that much, but they wouldn't have had the skills or the time to do it themselves. And because I
Totally.
prepared like 30 reels for them, they then could start sharing it. And the more you share, the more it reaches people. And when people see physically other people and how their money affects it, they will donate more. So I same thing, like not only I couldn't show up for protest, but I live on disability benefits. So I don't have the money myself to donate, because I live very, very strictly depending on what the government has decided that month that I get. But what I could do was get the information to people that hopefully have the disposable income. And I was like, if it goes here, you know where it gets. You get a receipt in human terms. And there's something to do for everyone. And it doesn't have to be as overwhelming as we assume it would be.
Mm. Yeah. How are you experiencing like the landscape of activism these days in this crazy moment? Like, do you see things shifting? Are there things you're concerned about, things you're excited about?
Um, Give me a second.
Yeah, of course.
So I think the main thing that we had a chance to learn in the last almost couple of years, since October 7th, 2023, there's been a huge shift in communal understanding, awareness, and knowledge. Because I think for the first time, we could witness the Palestinian genocide without the media propaganda machine behind it, without just going by headlines, because people from Gaza were showing us what's happening. And I think that created a shift in collective awareness and understanding of how the world works, and how, when you look at it, everything is indeed connected. There are systems of oppressions, and climate change depends on it. And colonialism depends on it. White supremacy depends on it. Patriarchy depends on it. And when you start to undo one, it has a domino effect. And I understand the incredible frustration because even as individuals that are part of supposedly democracies, and we vote those democracies in, it feels frustrating, the fact that we have come to realize the way that we have evolved since neoliberalism, realistically since the 70s, is that we have given up the collective power to governments that do not necessarily listen to what we want, but listen to economic interests. So that's been, I think, the main frustrating thing. Like here in the UK, we know for a fact that the majority wants the government to stop giving arms to Israel, to stop facilitating the genocide. We are complicit in it and we don't want to be. But the government is not listening to us. And so, we have all these things about we find ways to help people in Gaza, we find ways to protest the government, but sometimes it feels like we are cowards. And again, going back to what I said before, I think one of the most important things that I've seen is learning about the difference between charity and mutual aid, which going back is the main topic of that essay that I talked about, the Zeppelin Carroll wrote about mutual aid and the Six of Pentacles. And it's understanding that the main challenge to all these systems comes from when we organize, when we create community between each other without the authority being given to someone supposedly in power. Like hierarchies don't work. Hierarchies is what got us here. And so structures and communities that are based on horizontal sharing of power, and that's why mutual aid is so effective, is because there's a common understanding of we are all in this together. I help you today because you're going to help me tomorrow. And this focus on community, when again, we come from a culture that just tells us about individualism and at best the nuclear family, I genuinely think it's the most it's the biggest challenge that we can present to all systems of powers at once. Because if we stand together against the decisions that are taken against our will, it makes a difference. The fact that we are here 18 months, more than 19 months now, because we are going into 2 years. But the fact that we are, the consciousness of people around what's happening in Gaza and understanding finally that it's not a complicated issue. It's a colonial project. I think to me, it's always very important to be loud about my own ignorance. And just like I didn't know about politics before October 7th, I didn't know that Israel was a colonial project. I didn't know the actual history of things. And I just knew what the media told me. And from headlines, from these kind of things, it all sounded like, oh, it's a complicated issue because there are rights on both sides. And being raised Catholic, to me, it was really easy to go, oh, yeah, right. Wasn't there a kingdom of Israel? We're talking about thousands of years ago. How do you settle an issue that is thousands of years ago? And then you look into it and you actually read books like the 100-Year War in Palestine, and you realize, oh, no, it was an arbitrary choice done in 1897 at the First Zionist Congress. And along with that, we considered Argentina, we considered nations in Africa, and then we settled on Palestine. And when you start to realize that, but those things are not talked about, we do not understand even here in the UK, the effect that the Balfour Declaration had for the UK government to just support Zionists in creating a state of Israel in Palestine, of a UK government that did not have the authority to decide for Palestine. And those are things that don't make the headlines because it's not a narrative that goes along with the propaganda machine. But now people have educated themselves because I think it's the only silver lining of social media, of things like TikTok, which we have very high resistance against. But we have seen directly from Palestinian people what's happening, and therefore we have educated ourselves. And I think that the awareness that we have now about the real issues of Palestine and Israel being a colonial project we didn't have 2 years ago. Those things have created a cultural shift. And I think that is probably the only silver lining of what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important these days to also be upfront about your ignorance, as you were saying, because the sooner
Oh,
you can
yeah.
get over what you don't know, the sooner you can humble yourself enough to, like, learn and listen to people and educate yourself, and that's more important than anything, I think, you know?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm always so loud about, hey, I knew nothing about this. I'm learning with you. It's I know why people can be worried about that, but I always felt like ignorance can be so easily cured. Like ignorance just means that you have more to learn. I don't have an issue with admitting ignorance, and I try to be loud about it because for some people, I think because of the essays, I think because one of the things that my autistic mind does is giving me special interest and hyper focus. And so most of the essays that I've done really are because I got stuck on a subject enough that I wanted to understand more. And then when I know enough, I'm like, okay, so maybe I can make it easier for people so that they don't have to go through all the research that I've gone through. That's really what happens in what I do. And I have never an issue in admitting I knew nothing about this. This is where I've learned. These are some sources. Let's do this together. Because I genuinely have the hope. I do have the hope that if I show that and people think for whatever reason from the video essays that I'm well read, which I am very practically not. Again, I don't read. Most of my information does not come from books because of dyslexia. So every time that I am given I'm said something like that as if it sounds like a compliment. I'm like, no, I'm not. And I understand why we believe that that's a positive thing. There are other ways to learn, and I'm very happy to share those because it's ableist otherwise.
Right. Yeah. And it's,
So
we need less barriers and more access at this time, you know?
so anytime that I can take myself a notch down to let people know I've learned, believe me, so can you, and it doesn't require half of the effort that you think it does. It's I have no issues in taking myself down notches and notches if it equalizes things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do think it's a service to also acknowledge that people are gonna be where they're at in their process too. Like, I think that so much I've seen a lot of harm be perpetrated against people for their ignorance, even when they're well-meaning people who, you know, have the intention to know and do better.
No. It's always something that I fight. Ironically, the video on capitalism and cottagecore was born because I saw a Reddit post 2 years ago now of someone well-meaning but ignorant on the issue that Shein was, and they just posted, I think, on the cottagecore subreddit saying, "Oh, I've seen this skirt and this sweater. I think they would be very cottagecore. What do you think?" And the screenshots were from Shein, and nobody in the comments tried to actually educate them and just dogpiled on them because it's Shein, so it's killing the planet. And I was like, and the few times that this person also replied to the comments was very clear about, I don't have time to go thrift, and I don't have money to spend more, which those two things alone made me understand this person is working multiple jobs and still don't have enough disposable income to afford more. And instead of understanding that and the inherent classism, we just dogpile on them and say, this is bad, don't do it. Just go around with, a robe or a sack of potato, and that's fine. And I was like, we are missing the point when there is this ignorance, but we are so lost in our own purity. Even that's the crazy thing to me. We managed to apply the individualistic need of capitalism to our feel good when it comes to social issues. It's very insidious the way that
So insidious.
even on leftist and progressive movements, we have managed to drag this individualism with us, and we get lost in it.
Yeah, the white supremacy, like, I just hear this, like, white supremacy thing of, like, if you're not doing it perfectly, if you haven't, like, read all the books and done all the research and, like, if you don't have all the words that you should know to use, then you're wrong and you're doing a disservice to humanity. It's like, that's not helping anyone, you know?
No, not at all.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
start and we do together. And honestly, it's a work that never ends. I do not expect to ever
Mm,
learn everything. We don't
yeah.
have enough lifetimes for all the information that is out there.
Mm-mm.
But the fact that there's intention to learn
Yeah.
more, it's something that should always be rewarded in my perception.
Yeah, yeah, and, we've talked a lot about your activism and how that's such it feels to me, and you can correct me, but it, like, feels like it is synonymous with your witchcraft. Um, is that kind of the activism piece the thing that's sort of keeping you afloat these days during these really
Uh,
intense times?
so when I started my witchcraft practice, I did not necessarily think that the two things would be connected.
Mm.
I started to go around with an app that would tell me what the plants in the pavement were like, what the
Mhm.
weeds were like, and that was it. And then I started to go around the local witchy and pagan circles, and I realized that incredibly white South Wales is.
Mm, mhm,
And I realized that in the way that I was treated, I don't think there was malice in it, but there was still the subconscious perception that I was something other, whether it
mm,
was because of my accent, whether it was because of how I looked. And that was some kind of reflection of mirror experience. So what I've gone through all my life, just because of my marginalization, not necessarily even because of witchcraft. And once I realized that, I was like, okay, maybe we need to talk about this kind of things. And that's why I started to share content. I didn't plan to necessarily share my practice or my witchness. That was never, that was not something that I planned on doing. And then
mm,
I started to have that experience, and I was like, maybe those things are connected though. And admittedly, here in South Wales, I have been quite active in activist circles since 2021, 22, during the lockdowns, because we have many different grassroots groups. One that I started to um, be present is called Glitter Cymru, which is the grassroots organization by and for queer people of color in Wales. And that was the first time actually that I was around people that were queer and of color like myself. That had never been a community that I had around. I had never met another Egyptian person that was queer before joining Glitter. Uh, so that was in the background. That was something that I was part of, and then I was brought into the committee within a year time because I just love to talk about stuff and intersectionality. Because again, going back to the point, I did love to do the research, and
mhm,
then at the times I was doing very rarely I was doing video essays because it was a lot of work, and the way that I was doing it was also a lot of work. Like they were properly academic essays, and then just happened
mm,
to become scripts from essays. Um, what I've learned since is to have more confidence in not only what I've read and documented, but also what comes from my own experience, which I think it's something that marginalized people
mm,
have an issue with. Like we feel like we always have to come with 7,000 receipts because our experience is always invalidated. When we talk
mm,
about racism, when we talk about transphobia, it's always like the detractors are always there to tell us our experience is not valid. So that was also a personal challenge for myself. No, my experience is valid because I hear it from myself and I hear it from my siblings that have the same experience. So when someone that doesn't have that experience try to tell us it's not true, maybe the issue lies with them, not with us.
mhm,
So that was a learning curve. And then realistically starting to do the research other than, it's nice to have all our jars with herbs. It's nice to have our crystals. It's nice to have, our wands and all our things and our altars. But when there's enough interest to understand as a witch, where do I come from? Who are the people that have gone under that name before? Were there people that have chosen that name, like, the reclamation witchcraft of the 70s and so second wave feminism like Starhawk? Or were there people that were given that name because society wanted to not only take them down a notch, but, the witch hunts and the witch trials? And so I'm starting to understand the history of where we come from, made it very clear to me that witchcraft exists as a rebellion to the system. Again, as I said before, most of the people that were accused of witchcraft and called witches were actually very likely not witches, but they were the margins. They were challenging the system in ways that the newly born capitalist system didn't want to be challenged. And which is why I usually take issue with people that use that famous sentence that we have put even on t-shirts now, that is, oh, we are the granddaughters of the witches that you couldn't burn, which I'm sure that comes from a place of benevolent ignorance, but I carry issue with it because we are at a stage in modern witchcraft where, at best, common culture does not take us seriously. Witches do not exist. The Enlightenment has made us sure to explain magic does not exist. Witches do not exist. With the repeal of the Witchcraft Act here in the UK in 1951, the difference was simply, oh, now you can say whatever you want. But before that, you still were just a scammer. You still were not a witch. 1700s made sure of that. So when we go and call ourselves witches, and we go in the past to see where the name comes from, that was a negative connotation. That was the term that a bully would use to bully you to death. So when we go under that name, it comes with a responsibility, which I think is the difference. And I wish more people understood that, witchcraft is a big umbrella nowadays, and we think that, tarot, astrology, divination, all those things go under, so you're naturally a witch. I don't think you are. I think you can be a magician, you can be an occultist, you can be an esotericist, which is the reason why the Nazis were interested in magic. We do not think of them as witches.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go by witch, you carry a legacy on your shoulders that is a legacy that comes from the margins. And so indeed, I in the way that I use it and in the consciousness that I have of the past, which, along with all the books that we read about spells and history, I think Caliban and the Witch by Silvia Federici, which connects the witch trials to the birth of capitalism, it's a fundamental reading that it's hard. It took me a year to read it back to back. But again, I'm very slow at reading. But it gives an idea of the legacy that we carry on our shoulders. And indeed, when we use the word witchcraft, it is intrinsic resistance to the system that does not want us to be independent, does not want us to be women, femmes that decide for themselves, does not want us to believe that we can care for the community rather than just for ourselves. And that was the reason why witch was the word, to make sure that you got rid of someone that did not adhere to the system. And because nowadays they don't take the word seriously, we have the privilege of going under that name. But we need to understand that it's more than crystals and cauldrons and herbs.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I also think that Caliban and the Witch is like a tough book to recommend, but such an important one to endeavor to like sit with for a long time, Yeah. Yeah, for all our listeners.
It's 6 chapters after all. I genuinely would not recommend to necessarily sit down and think, I'm going to read it back to back. I
Yes.
couldn't. But, in small doses. Yeah.
You have a great resource list too, that I encountered of like witchy books.
I've made the Activist Witch reading list.
Yes,
which has
it's a good one.
Expanded. Yes, because it was mainly about witchcraft books that included activism, and in the last few months, it's been expanded to just good resources on understanding, again, systems of oppressions. So now it's split in categories, and there's one for witchcraft and activism, there's one about human rights, there's one about feminism, there's one about trans rights, and how all those things connect for collective liberation, really. So yeah, it's there, it's free, it's a lot of stuff. It doesn't connect to Amazon, which to me was the most important thing. So you can get all these books, and sometimes they are free on archive.org. So there's the link for that. And if they're not, there are links like to bookshop.org that supports independent bookshops rather than Bezos. It's the little things.
Yeah, it's the little things that count. And I know witches and their books. So do what you can out there.
So, and a conference of witches is there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Of course.
Well, I'm curious, as we kind of wrap up this conversation, what are you feeling hopeful about, or what is bringing you joy these days?
Mm-hmm. So, honestly, again, it's the theme of this, but it's what I believe. Witchcraft is intrinsically community-based. I think that this rediscovery of community and of horizontal connections rather than hierarchical, it feels like a silver lining in the kind of devastation that we have seen around, especially in the last couple of years. But it feels like a silver lining because specifically here for the history of the UK, it makes me think of the 80s and the social devastation that the UK went through under Margaret Thatcher. And even then, the silver lining was that the situation was so dire that people united against the abuse of power that Margaret Thatcher and the Tories were doing here. So there were the miners' strikes in '84, and there was so much rebellious art. There was punk, and it was born because of that, because there needed to be a punching back. So I do believe that the only silver lining is with things getting dire and the lack of a higher authority to go and present our grievances in a way that will be listened to. People are starting to understand that we need to help each other. We need to organize in communities. We need to move forward together. And again, I'll go back to the consciousness and the awareness that even the random average person now, after 2 years of genocide in Gaza, I challenge a person to not have at least heard once the fact that the definition, the words that were never associated with Israel, that was colonialism, they have heard it now. And if that planted a seed, they can now do research to understand, oh, it's actually a colonial project. We had no idea. I understand why they had no idea that it was a situation like similar to South Africa and the apartheid state in South Africa. The fact that South Africa was one of the first states to stand on the side of Palestine. And before, those two things were never commonly understood. So in the devastation of what's happening, I don't think that anyone can just bask in ignorance anymore. And I genuinely wish that it didn't take this level of loss on a generational level for people to stop and think and understand. But I think it's also a responsibility that I feel we have because of the losses. If there's anything that we can do to understand and remember and make sure that every single Palestinian life lost, not only in the last 2 years, but arguably since 1948, at least it's remembered and there's a reason, and now we know. And this global consciousness awakening because of information and the way that it gets to us and the way that it's not being gate kept by media we have to take that, and we have to take responsibility with it. And the way that we are gathering together gives me hope.
Yeah, I feel that. Thank you. It's nice to reflect on the ways that things are changing so quickly, but
Yeah.
there are these ways that humans are always going to find to like coalesce together and to rally against what is the oppressive force. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'd like to think so. I think progress is inevitable. Liberation is inevitable. Fascism has never won on the long term. Unfortunately, as human beings that are limited by lifetimes that are just under a century, sometimes we happen to live in those historical times where history goes in cycles, and so it feels like we're going backwards. And the hope there as well is it doesn't necessarily matter what I see in my lifetime, but it's important that I plant seeds, for the infamous trees that I will not sit in the shade of. I don't have children. I don't plan to have children, but I don't think it takes having that level of personal investment in the future to appreciate that we can do something that in 100, 200, 300 years will have made the world better.
Yeah. And to think of your legacy in this way that is really rooted in these magical intentions, I think is so powerful in a world that might ignore the power of our spells and our wishes and our actions. So, yeah.
Yeah, I hope so. I plant seeds, and I hope that they yield something for someone at any point in time, whether I find out or not. That's the best that I can hope for, really.
Absolutely. Well, I am really grateful for all the seeds you planted here. I'm sure folks
Thank
have gotten a
you.
lot
Thanks
out of
for
this
having me.
conversation. And will you share where folks can learn more from you and support you?
Yeah, I do weekly videos on YouTube under Activist Twitch, so you can definitely find me there. And then on there are most of my links. I
Awesome.
do tarot readings. My profit from tarot readings go split between the Good Law Project here in the UK that is trying to bring back trans rights, because we are turf islands for a reason. And the other half go to Cwitches to Gaza, which is this mutual aid group that supports Palestinian refugees in Cairo. That's what I do. So
Wonderful.
that's where I can.
Thank you so much, Ysha. It was really a pleasure to talk with you. And
thank you, Casey, for having me. And it's such an honor to be part of your project now of Modern Witches, part of the conference.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to the Modern Witches podcast. We hope you've been inspired to cultivate your own magic and to craft your own spiritual practices. Let us know what sparked your curiosity by leaving us a comment on this episode or leave us a review. And don't forget to subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode. Your feedback and engagement truly fills our cups. If you're looking for more ways to gather with your fellow witches, please support our work on Patreon. Learn more at modernwitches.org. Blessed be.